Welcome to 4TG, where we empower the next generation of female athletes to grow, lead, and thrive in sport and beyond. If you're eager to gain inspiration and practical insights to pursue your sporting ambitions, while hearing from trailblazers shaping the landscape of women's sport, you've found your community. So, whether you're gearing up or winding down, this podcast is tailored just for you. Not all clubs, welcome to the 4TG podcast. I'm extremely grateful to have the three of you on today to talk about sexism and homophobia in sport, especially with the timely nature of Mitch Brown coming out yesterday as the first openly bi male in the AFL history. The story alone shows how much visibility matters, but also how far we still have to go in tackling sexism and homophobia in sport to make every club a safe space for athletes, particularly women and those a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So while keeping your identities anonymous, and if you're comfortable in doing so, I'd love to know more about your experiences of sport and if you face any sexism or homophobia firsthand.
So I am Jen, one of the three founders of the Not All Clubs platform. Similar to some of your other guests, I've been playing sport my whole life. Specifically for myself, footy. I played footy. I was one of the girls that played in under 11s and under 13s and then sort of hit that age route where you couldn't continue. And even at that young age, that experience of sexism, even though at the time I wouldn't have been able to label it, I loved footy, but I would say impacted me in a negative way in that I felt like I was different or something was wrong with me because I felt like I was the only girl that wanted to play. Obviously now I know that that's not the case. There were so many girls and women that wanted to play, but because of the way that either, intentionally or unconsciously I was treated through wanting to play footy, it had a huge impact on me personally. And one thing I always remember was listening to Chelsea Randall talk about playing as a junior. And, Chelsea Randall's obviously a superstar and a fabulous human, but she was basically like, I always knew I could do it. I could play AFL, I was going to be the best player I could be. And everyone experiences those things differently because for me, it was almost like a shame thing attached with the fact that I love playing footy, which now feels crazy to say, but I never felt like that. I always felt almost like if I met new people playing netball, I didn't even want them to know that I played footy. And I just love that, I guess, girls don't have to feel like that now. And, while there's a lot more, I guess, to my background and my sporting background, to me, that's probably the biggest thing that feeds into me was remembering how I felt, when I was younger being involved in the footy.
Yeah, and it's almost a badge of honour now to say that you play footy as a woman because it's almost a bit badass and it shows that the physical nature that we can have and non-contact sports aren't just for girls. We can play contact and we can play them bloody well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember running out with the boys once and the other team all said, they got a girl on the team, And luckily I was quite good at footy because you kind of couldn't get away with playing back then. If you weren't, you kind of get ushered out. But all these boys saying that, and I think I just about started crying and came off and pretended I'd hurt myself or something like that. And to go through that when you're 10, 11 years old, whereas, now, like you say, it's amazing. It could be something real conversation starter, something to be really proud of. Parents are really proud. I was lucky that mine were, but I know that wasn't the same for everyone. So,
and I guess talking about the inception of Not All Clubs, can you share the moment that pushed you over the edge to create Not All Clubs, and why did you choose social media as the platform to exercise your advocacy?
With the Not All Clubs platform, it was probably something that I'd thought about for a long time, I guess, explaining where I was as a junior and then eventually joining back into the women's footy and being involved in that for a number of years. There was just so many things that I was frustrated about or found really difficult, and I felt very alone. And I met Ripley through playing footy, and we really vibed or came together on a lot of those things, and we were from different states, and it was wild to find that a lot of the same things were going on. And then I was involved in footy with Lara as well, and the same thing. It was great to find these like-minded people, and the catalyst for us was probably when you were involved in our First Nations round with the club, and no one told the women's team about the first year I was there. No one told the women's team. It just went ahead and we weren't involved. And the next year I spoke to the club and said, look, if you're going to do this again, you really need to involve the women. There should be a whole club community event where we're really working towards something positive for First Nations people. And the next year, no one really gave us any information again. I heard a couple of whispers, and then about 2 days before they sort of rang me and said, we'd already had training, and they said, oh, we've got the Guernseys for you, wearing them on Saturday, and we had this away game. And I said, well, what else are we doing for it? And I was sort of met with silence, and I remember calling Ripley, and I don't want to wear them. And I called girls in the team, they didn't want to wear them because we feel like we should be attaching value, we should be raising awareness or raising funds or something for First Nations people if we're going to be purporting that that's what we're doing. And we had some conversations with Lara about it too. And we spoke about this recently. We really think that was our moment that said, we need to start doing something about us. We need to start, giving a voice. Maybe one of the other two want to talk a little bit about the development of the platform, but that was the way that we all came together, and that was the last straw, really.
Yeah, and like just to add to what Jen was saying, basically what we saw was like almost a gap. We were like, these men are so far from being able to understand why it's an issue, that there is no education around why we would wear these Guernseys. Like, you knew nothing about the artwork or the artist or anything. And they were like, well, no, you just slap the dots on and then we get a thumbs up for inclusion. And you're like, no. There are steps that we need to make. And we were just really realizing that gap existed. And we're like, well, maybe there are more people that understand why this is not okay, but maybe don't have the words to describe it. And maybe we can sort of, infiltrate that and try and educate people. As per our platform, I do think that a lot of the time we almost want to deliver these serious messages with like a little bit of sugar on top. And so we're like, well, social media is a way that we can deliver serious messages, but then also, make dumb memes about when men won't share the oval and they're like, and make ourselves laugh and hopefully make other people laugh. And I guess, educate everyone along the way as well.
Yeah, which you've done a fantastic job. And I think it's just, you've proved that you don't need a face to have a voice and you don't need a name to make a change. You can do so much just as an ordinary person or behind an alias.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jen might touch on this a little bit afterwards about why we decided to go down that kind of route around anonymity. But I just wanted to quickly jump back with our platform, and there was a big story that came out. I remember like the week that we kind of launched it, and it was that story about the Kyneton women's team within the club, and shout out to those guys, absolute legends at the Kyneton women's team. And I was getting mates sending me all of this stuff, and we heard about it, we put it on our platform, and then all of a sudden we just got quite a few, like 100 followers, and then started to talk to that team and wondering whether we can get some kind of campaign or something off the ground. And I remember them being like, it was like a week before International Women's Day, and they were like, let's do like a protest. And we were like, what, 2 days old? I was like, guys, we're doing a protest at Parliament House. And they're like,
let's go.
Jen and Ripley were like, maybe we should just chill for a second. And I was like, nah, let's burn this shit to the ground. I was furious. I was so mad. And it was the first time like we tried anything. I've recently moved to Melbourne, and I was like, it's happening everywhere. And so I think that these stories, they're constant. They're across the state, they're across the country. And yeah, but I don't know if, Jen, you want to add anything about the anonymity and why we decided to go down that route, because it was contentious at the first time we discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Is that something that you want to hear about as well, Kylie? Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's hear all about it.
Well, interestingly enough, that sort of catalyst that we spoke about was a long time ago now. It was probably across 2023, maybe heading into 2024. And we actually did our first episode in 2024, and it wasn't anonymous. We did it as ourselves. It was called, it was Not All Slurs. And we spoke about, obviously really topical at the moment, some of the homophobic language that AFL players were using. Jeremy Finlayson at the time was the big story. And I'll also mention that in that episode, Ripley also highlighted Zippy Fish as someone to look out for coming into the AFLW.
Well, there you go.
Ripley likes to remind us that she was ahead of the curve on that one. But the first one we did, we weren't anonymous, but, we're still finding our feet, as I'm sure you are, with what to do and how to do it best. And it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't our best work. And we sort of pulled back and we did some work in the background to relaunch. And this time we really spoke about how we wanted to present ourselves. And we definitely think there is power in people being able to connect with a person, with a personality, whether that's a known person or someone they grow to know, something like that. But we discussed that on our platform. What we wanted to really do was have an alias, keep anonymous as best we can. Our friends and family know who we are and what we're doing. But we thought that would be a great way for people to be able to see themselves in us, to really connect with us. You know, we could be them, we could just be someone else at their club. And we know it can be a bit daunting talking to people or sharing the stories. But we thought maybe if we really, you know, we are grassroots people, and if we come to this from that angle and continue to be that, people can connect with us a bit easier. There's probably a lot of words to explain that, but it's a really important part of this whole journey for us. That was probably the main reason. Secondary to that, we do keep, if you've listened to our podcast, you know that we keep clubs anonymous too. And that's for the same reason. It's because a lot of these issues, if we say, oh, Club A did this, we're saying that it's just Club A, but most of the time it's clubs A through Z that are doing it. So we thought if we're going to keep clubs anonymous, because we think, you know, that shows how widespread things are, we're applying that principle to ourselves, I guess. And the last one, which is probably a bit of a disappointing one, was around, you know, we obviously created some really good networks or relationships with people that are doing the same things as us. And one of them that's been a really great mentor for us, when we spoke about suggestion of anonymity, she said, look, to protect yourselves, for your personal safety as well, because of the things you're going to be talking about, it's probably really important that you do that you keep that anonymity, because you will get messages that you don't like. You will get people, you know, talking about it. And we've experienced that to a level. So beyond the relatability, there's also that, you know, additional side where we want to be able to talk about, you know, anything. So it gives us a level of protection too, I guess. Yeah.
You're almost like the gossip girl of clubs and sexism, but you're doing good work. So if you were Dan, you're doing great things.
Lara
Exactly.
loves
Feel
that.
like one.
Lara is frothing on that. She is like, yes, we are.
Lara's here for it. So with all the, I guess, DMs that you're getting now, I'd love to know, without naming names or clubs, but what sort of stories are you receiving most often?
Yeah, I guess like the pattern that we're seeing mostly is occurring in all male-dominated sports, like across the country, really. As Jin said, like, you know, we are predominantly football focused. We're looking at football because that's what we know, that's our background. But the messages we're getting from people who play in male-dominated sports, that they happen even like we did discuss it overseas. We're getting people from the UK that resonate with our posts so much, and like they've never even heard of footy before, don't even know it's probably a sport, and they're like, yeah, like I feel you, like I'm feeling the same things happening at my club. And it just proves that it's like not one sport or one state that's the issue. It's really a systemic issue. Like we've been hearing messages from baseball about access to oval space in terms of like not allowing the women to have the diamond, like question mark, what's with that? Like it's really, really odd behavior. And I think also what I want to touch on is the breadth of sexism that we see, because across the board it's sexist, but it starts from like micro practices of being kicked off the oval by men, or being told we have to wear the men's uniforms, all the way to being sexually assaulted by someone at your club, or the story about how they had to abandon the game at halftime because a male player abused a 15-year-old girl umpire. And so it's kind of across the full spectrum of sexism what we're seeing, but it goes from micro practices all the way to extreme harassment. And it's intersectional as well with, you know, women of colour and women with a disability as well, which I think Ripley might touch on a little bit later.
Yeah, it's clearly, as you say, it's not an incident in isolation. It's a systemic cultural problem. So what impact do you think that these environments are having on young female athletes wanting to go to the next level, or just wanting to be part of a club, as well as those members of the queer community, in terms of their confidence, safety and belonging?
Yeah, like as Lara was saying, with our stories, because of the breadth of them, what we're seeing is all these clubs that have juniors, that have women, they want to advertise that they've got women around their clubs. They've got somewhere for your daughter to play, but then at the same time, the daughter is either being subjected to this kind of abuse or harassment herself, or is seeing her peers, the women that she's looking up to also. And then as damaging as, patriarchal structures and oppressive structures are to women and to people of colour and people with disabilities, they're just as harmful to the non-disabled white men that are, that the structures are made for, because it's not good for them to live into that and think that this is okay either. And it's creating an environment where they're not allowed to feel their feelings or whatever else, or they can only feel their feelings if they're being aggressive and punching someone about it. And so it's just as harmful to all of the young women that are trying to come through sport as it is to the men. Like, as we're, is topical at the moment, for it to be 2025, and we are only just getting a past player who is talking about their sexuality. Like, that's just insane. These structures are just as oppressive to the men as they are to everyone else. And that's why I guess we're so passionate about disarming them and disabling these systems, because we want these environments to be inclusive, because sport is super fucking fun and we want everyone to be able to enjoy it.
And sport is also so important just outside of the game, but for your confidence, for your sense of belonging, and for all the life lessons you learn that you take through to your career, you take as a parent, you take as a partner, whatever it may be. I think we sometimes underestimate just how important sport is in shaping the future generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in that, and with the shaping, shaping future sports stars, shaping future people, one of the issues that we're finding with these stories being shared and the experience of especially young women in clubs is that they're not getting the longevity of connection that you see in male players. So one of the biggest things that will make your club a club with a really strong women's program is being able to build a history. So if you look at, when we talk about pathway, we often talk about the elite pathway. But if we talk about the pathway of players from juniors to senior players, and the player that isn't, the elite player, if I'm going to go through and, play Auskick and then play juniors and then play, as a young woman, come through the B grade, the C grade, have an A grade career, then pull back into the B grade, and I've played 250 games for this club. Everyone knows who I am. I don't have to be the best player, but we all know that guy at the club. He's just a legend because he's been there. But women are leaving clubs because of reasons that they need to, because they're not being treated right. They're not being given the basics. And sometimes this attitude towards women leaving clubs is that, oh, she's a club hopper, these different things. But what people don't realise, it's actually really difficult for us to leave. You've normally got a really strong friendship group. A lot of people love their footy club, even if they don't really love exactly what's going on at their footy club. So to leave is a huge thing. And not only are you getting a personal disconnect from your community, you're also missing out on building that 10 to 15 years' time when all of the retired women are then sponsoring the young women. So we're not able to get that, that non-disconnected, for want of better words, journey. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, absolutely. And I saw a stat that said, this is an old stat by the way, but it said that 75% of female athletes experienced or witnessed sexism in sport, and 40% of LGBTQIA plus athletes reported feeling unsafe or unwelcome. And that actually shocked me, because I actually think it's a lot higher than that. Like, I could nearly ask every female athlete who I know, and they would say that they have experienced sexism firsthand, as well as the people of the queer community. It's got to be greater than 40%. So it just goes to show how important and how underrepresented in stats and in everything these sort of figures are.
Yeah, and I think we've been talking a bit about how these things seem to be a bit closer to the forefront because they're being reported on in the media a lot more. And I completely agree. I think that it would be 100% of women have experienced, and 100% of queer people and people of colour have experienced some kind of harassment, discrimination, whatever it may be. They would have had an experience at some point playing sport, most definitely. And the fact that it's being reported more, I think, is great. But it seems like people that are, I guess, maybe living under a rock are going, oh, this is all happening so much more now. And you're like, no, it's been happening the whole time. We're just bringing it to your attention now because for some reason we've decided it matters. It's always mattered, but now it's getting a lot more media attention, which I think is great. But then we need some changes as well with that.
Yeah. So speaking of changes, what changes have you seen since starting Not All Clubs and calling out this behaviour?
Well, definitely, I think just the fact that we've got, I guess, more people reaching out. Like, a lot of the people who DM us will tell us a story, but then there's a lot of people who DM us and they're looking for advice. And again, obviously, we can't have statistics of how much that would have happened before as to after because we didn't exist. But I think just the fact that even within where I play footy, there's more of the people, instead of the women kind of going, oh, this is a bit shit that we get this oval, they're now going, okay, well, who do we talk to about this? Because blah, blah, blah. And we're starting to see more people looking solutions focused and not just getting really stuck in, like, you know, we love to have a bitch and a moan, but if you're bitching and moaning and then you're not looking to fix the problem, then what's the point? Like, catharsis, great, but let's actually try and address the issue. And I think we are seeing a lot more people becoming empowered to go, okay, how do we actually fix this, or where is the root of this problem and how do we change it?
And you guys were really prolific in the red armband protests against the Victorian government, who made cuts against gender equity and violence prevention, I think is towards the end of May, including my club. We also wore them. So tell us a little bit more about that, how it came into being, and I guess the effect that that had, and how incredible it would have been for you guys to realize that you were sort of behind that.
Yeah, it was really exciting, actually. I mean, that's probably not the right word considering it's also fucking depressing. But essentially, what had happened was somebody told us, I mean, it was all over the media, that the Vic government cut the Office for Women in Sport and Rec, and within that defunded the violence prevention in sport funding that they get towards the programs. And I mean, we were just raging. We were so frustrated, and we were like, you know what? We need to do something about this. Like, we've had enough. And so we kind of had a bit of a chat about like, could we, again, me burning shit down in protests. And I think there's a theme going on here. But we were like, can we do a protest? Can we boycott? What can we do? And then we came up with the idea of having a red armband to protest against the cuts. But then I think there was another suggestion about doing two to also show our support for the women who have been, well, I think there was 29 at the time, 29 women who'd been killed by violence that year. And then I think we did the week-long socials, and it went to 35, I think, or something, 35 by the end of that week, which is horrendous. And we just kind of got into a room with a couple of people that we know and said, how can we get this up and running? Some of them were known to the media, and yeah, we just put it on socials and thought, we'll give this a go. But we were just like so shocked by how many clubs took it upon themselves. I mean, we started in, I think, February. And so, you know, after 3 months of being around, I don't know, that's probably not accurate. There was probably about 60 to 70 clubs that kind of took part in the red armband campaign. So yeah, it was incredible to know that we were kind of behind that. So yeah, and so good for all of the clubs that got involved as well. It was really powerful. I mean, I was like low key crying on like a Friday night with my bowl of red wine, like, you know, really embracing the red theme. So yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think that really put you guys on the map and at the forefront of a lot of people. So no, that was brilliant. But on that topic, like, obviously you guys are just everyday people doing God's work, and you're getting stories with a lot of weight behind them. How do you sort of juggle that in your own lives and still keep positive and pushing forward with what you're doing, even though I'm sure you must just get inundated with negative messages about sport?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that it's heavy. All of us have worked in really different areas. We've worked with some heavy stuff with high needs kids, or I've worked in some roles where I've been on phones with people experiencing different challenges throughout their lives. And this gives us the same feeling, and the three of us do talk about that a lot. Sometimes we'll get a story at a really random time, and you've got to be really mindful, I guess, of your online time, because you're just in the middle of, you might be going to the shops to get something, and then you read this, you know, really challenging stories. And some of them have been stories that people have shared with us that we've not been able to share. And we absolutely respect that. And we want people to be able to come to us because it hopefully helps them. But we definitely spend a lot of time debriefing with each other around it and talking through things and the people in our lives, because I guess a concern for us is it is a huge weight, and we don't want to get to the point where we can't see the reason that we're doing it, if that makes sense. We, you know, they're not always there, but, you know, we get good stories too, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. But there's also something really powerful about being part of this sharing journey. So while it is heavy, we feel really honoured, I guess, to be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as part of one of the VFLW clubs who cut their women's funding at the start of the year, the more disappointing thing besides that in itself, which is just extremely gutting, but it was the lack of media attention we received around it. I think there was 2 or 3 articles about it. And that's sort of the genesis of why I started this podcast, because I just thought, if this is happening at a semi-elite level and no one gives a shit, then what's happening at the grassroots level where there's no media, there's no coverage? And that's what's incredible about Not All Clubs, is that you care about the grassroots level just as much as you do the elite level.
Yeah, and I think as we are gathering these stories, which, you know, the best thing and the worst thing about our followers is that they are fastidious repliers. So when we are responding to messages, we're getting so many back that are like, thank you so much, we love you all, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, okay, but I'm trying to reply to all 20 of you. And now you've all replied thanking me and I can't deal with this. But it's also an amazing problem to have, because it means that they care so much. Like, I can imagine, you know, if we were on a bigger platform and, hey, if we grow into a bigger thing, you know, some of it's going to get lost in there. But for the moment with us, we actually all quite enjoy going through the messages and seeing these. And because I can just imagine, you know, I know that they're all feeling how I was feeling when I'm going, well, where do I go with this story? Like, who can I tell? What can I do about it? Whereas that's where we're trying to bridge that gap to go, well, we're going to empower you to be able to figure it out. And we're going to be a place for you to air your grievances, but also maybe learn some things. And just, yeah, like as Jim was saying, going through them is like, if you think that, you know, the worst things that could happen at a football club, and then we read the message and we're like, oh, it's worse. It's worse than we thought it could ever be. But at the same time, we're like thankful, at least, you know, it's somewhere to compile these things. And one day down the track, we do want to create quite the archive of all the stories, because we think that they're all really important and no one more important than the other. You know, whether it's just the fact that you got kicked off the oval for the junior boys, or whether you have been sexually assaulted, either way are important to us, because each of them is like a way that shows that the system is not working for us and we need to make a difference.
Yeah, and I guess what you do so well is how you word a lot of things, and it's often done either straight to the point, which I love, or there's a bit of a humorous element to it. But by using that voice and by being quite direct and to the point, are you getting a lot of criticism or backlash from doing that?
I think we still haven't quite figured out how we want to respond to things like that. We do have very different ways of answering. Lara just wants to put the loser alarm on for everyone and berate them. And then I feel like Jen and I often will, I don't know, maybe a bit cheeky. Maybe we're like, oh, it's a teachable moment and we're going to take this, and maybe if we deliver it in the right way, they'll learn. And then they'll respond and be an idiot. And we're like, oh, why did I waste my time trying to teach you?
You should have burnt them to the ground.
We should have.
Go with Lara's approach. Loser alarm.
Loser alarm.
Set it off. No, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, I messaged Jen today because I was responding to someone and I started with, there is a special place in hell for this person. Like, it was really, I mean, in my defense, this person was a piece of shit. So, but not someone that we wrote in or whatever. It was something happening in the media or whatever. But I was like, but I deleted it and said, that doesn't sound good. So I am progressing, guys. I'm getting
There is growth.
There is growth in this for sure.
Oh, no, I love it. I think the loser alarm sometimes needs to be set off more often instead of tippy-toeing around these issues. So well done. Look, as we've said, like, it's showing up across all different sports, all different age groups, all different levels. So again, it's clearly a systemic issue. So from where you're sitting, what do you think at a systemic level needs to change so we can stamp out this sort of inequality in sport within Australia and worldwide?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the barriers that women are facing in this, it's because that clubs mirror broader systemic issues, right? So under a patriarchal system, it tells us that women shouldn't really exist in male-dominated spaces like football or male-dominated sports. So I'm actually going to answer this by looking at using a feminist theory of framework. And before I lose anyone, feminist theory just means like loosely gender equality. Everyone just chill out, all right? Everyone calm down. But basically there's like essentially like 4 main key things of feminist theory. And liberal feminism is like the OG one. It's the first one. And basically it's like women deserve equal access and opportunities in sporting clubs, like really revolutionary shit. So we're looking at like equal oval access and things like that. So with that, it looks at reforming policies and governance and laws so that women are treated equally. So you're keeping the same structure, but trying to make it fair. So that's like one side that you can do. So you can go down the reforming policy, which as a policy officer in my main job, I'm a big fan of. But then we look into the next phase, which is radical feminism. Again, guys, it's fine. Calm down. It's not crazy shit. We're not burning our bras. It's all good. But I do like this one. So basically, it looks at like the problem is patriarchy itself. So it's showing that men hold all the power. So like sport has been built for men by men, all of that kind of stuff, from rules to facilities to equal access on ovals. Oval access and general media coverage, all of that. So this side is looking at creating women-led or gender-diverse leagues, which is something that has been discussed recently. Rather than fighting to change the system and letting women come in, it's let's get rid of this system. It's not working. We've already tried for so many years. Let's just do our own thing and see how that goes. So that's the next one, and probably one of my favorites examples of what we could do. And then the next one, which we're really passionate about, is intersectionality feminism, which just mainly means like gender inequality doesn't exist in isolation. So women's experiences are also shaped by race, class, sexuality, disability, all of that. So as a white woman, like I will face challenges at a football club for just like existing. But this is nothing close to compared to a woman of color in a football club, a woman with a disability, things like that. And the last one is postmodern feminism. So this is kind of a new wave that looks at there's no single truth about gender or identity. So gender is like socially constructed, and categories like man and women are like fluid. So when we talk about like Ladies' Day, what does that actually mean? And when we're saying that the main oval belongs to the men, well, like who said that the men like have the main oval in the first place? So that really looks at language. So there's four main, I guess, things there that you can change systemically. I also think that governance is key. So it's not about putting like Gaz's misses on the board for like a tick the box thing. It's about ensuring the right women are in governance. It's not tokenistic. And I think codes of conduct is also huge. So that needs to be more meaningful. Like players know on the field, if they have a dangerous tackle, there's a consequence, there's a tribunal, there's a suspension, etc. But what happens when someone sexually harasses or assaults someone at a football club? There's just as much of a breach of code, yet there's no consequence for that I've seen in my time. So every club should have clear reporting processes, where to go to, who handles the complaint, what referrals or supports are available, and what disciplinary actions follow. And yeah, I think also just creating a really safe culture as well, and leadership have to enforce all of this. They are the key to all of this. In organizational psychology, there is a direct correlation between effective leadership and well-being of the people underneath you. So that's a really long answer, but
I think you should write a theory of change, because that was fantastic. And I think it's so right. Like even the people in positions, let's be real, most of them are old white men. So they don't have the same representation. If a woman was on that board, and not to say that she needs to come in and completely burn the place down, but just to say, hey, let's consider this, because from a female perspective, I wouldn't feel super inclusive, or I wouldn't feel super safe in this environment. So it's the need for more diversity on boards and in leadership positions, because if you're always surrounded by people who are the same as you, you're going to be in an echo chamber. Nothing's going to change. So I think that is a huge one that can sort of, I say it can be simply changed, but it sort of can. Just get people who are more diverse, who have different backgrounds, different opinions of you, and that's like the first really big step.
100%.
Now, so we've talked about systemic change. Let's talk about what we can all do on an individual level.
Yeah, so I guess a really good first step is to follow us, because we're amazing. No, but I do think create a space, particularly online, and start following people that you, I guess, agree with, or follow people that challenge you, but follow people that you agree with so that you're getting some ideas around sport. So, follow the Female Athlete Project, follow Kylie, follow 42G, get around on your socials, all of these places that are, I guess, pushing forward the same ideas that you want seen pushed forward. I guess get informed, so know the facts about things so that you can, I don't know how anyone else feels in an argument, but if I feel like I'm only about 90% sure on a topic, then I'm not going to argue because I'm too anxious that I'll get things wrong. So I want to know exactly what is going on. I want to know some statistics if there are some. I want to be able to communicate well. I want to know the right words to use. I want to know what logical fallacies are so I can recognize them when they're being used. And so then I can articulate why, we're not actually arguing about this topic right now. We're going to focus on what we're speaking about. And then, build your support, find the people that, find the pages that agree with you, find the people at your club that you can align with that are also as pissed off and maybe want to burn stuff down as much as Lara does and be on the same page. And then be proactive. Don't accept that these little things, we hate so much when we're hearing these stories and they're going, well, the club just thought it wasn't that big of a deal that we didn't have Guernseys that fit. I'm like, well, it is a fucking big deal, because if you don't have Guernseys that fit, well, then you're more likely to get injured. You're more likely to feel uncomfortable. There are so many other things that flows on. It just shows that you don't matter. So all of these little things, they're like, oh, well, it's so small, don't worry about it. Well, if it's so small, then let's just fix it then. If it's not too big of a deal, we'll just fix it. So, I guess my thing is be informed, learn how to communicate well so you're confident in what you're saying, find supportive people, and then, be proactive. Let's just call out the little things because they all matter.
They do. And something that Hayley, the guest of this week's podcast, said that one thing we do is just call out drive-by comments as well, because that is so important. We've all been surrounded by people who say, oh, he's playing like a girl. Knock that on the head. It doesn't take much. You just say, hey, that's not on. It really is something so simple, but something so powerful and effective to just prompt them to have the self-awareness that, actually, you know what? That's a small little gesture, but that means a lot, and you're degrading women in sport.
Yeah, and that's where we need our male allies to do that well, because their voices hold weight.
And we've probably got just a quick side story that really ties in here around language and the drive-by comments and calling it out. There was a club that I was at where our Pride round was being celebrated, and we could talk forever about Pride rounds and how clubs do Pride rounds and what could, it's just the women for some reason that are running and being involved in these Pride rounds, and there should be a whole of club event. And the girls wanted to have this drag queen come and perform, and they were very excited about having this person there on the day, a lot of energy around. And the board obviously had a discussion about it one night, and the takeaway was one of the board members came and said to the women, look, we're not going to allow you to do that because this is a family club. And I think that was one of the first times I'd almost felt speechless at how to even approach this. Obviously, we did address it with him, and we spoke to this man that had delivered this, but he probably, while he's obviously the vessel and delivering that to us, we'd found him to really listen and engage with us. And our concern around that was, how did our whole board discuss this? And everyone was in that room, and everyone thought it was okay for that to be the takeaway. And it was a huge red flag. Yeah.
That is a joke. I remember that club because I also am aware about the sexual assaults and sexual harassments that happen at that club. So one hand you're saying there's no drag queen because we're a family club, and the next minute you're letting football players continue to play after sexual assault claims and not doing anything about it. So isn't that just something?
Yep.
And what better way to be a family club than to have this fabulous diversity on show that everyone can be a part of it. It would have been a fabulous experience for everyone, including those board members, the young girls, the young boys. They missed a huge opportunity, I think, to grow their club, their platform, their programs, just through, whether it's unconscious bias or outright, homophobia and rejection of people who live lives differently than how they center themselves. But it was an experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? Like, that's why families want to go to the AFLW as opposed to the AFL, because it
Bang
is
on.
so much more of a inclusive, fun environment where, Joe next year is not going to belt the shit out of Peter because they're on different teams and all that sort of stuff. It's not an environment where you want your kids to be part of. So, yeah, doing that stuff is family friendly. So, if we instill Lara's 4 theories of change and we all individually do our part and we get it right in the next 10 years, what does sport look like in Australia?
We probably have a couple of answers for this. We've got our number one goal, which hopefully won't take the 10 years, but the number one goal is clubs admitting that there's a problem, and whether that be football, basketball, cricket, soccer, corfball, wherever you are, wherever you play, predominantly the male-dominated sports, we would love, as part of that 10-year plan, for step one, a big mandate from not all clubs is clubs agreeing, acknowledging, seeing the problem. Because what we're finding now is we can't even have the level one discussion, let alone talk about the change, because everyone's got a reason, an argument, a justification. We just need to be able to sit in a room together and we can't fix everything right now, but we hear you, and this is what we can do. So for me, that's probably step one, hopefully earlier than the 10 years. I don't know, Lara, Ripley, if you guys have got a bit of a projection differently or further forward.
Yeah, well, I think just sort of as adding to that, I guess in admitting that there's a problem, then we also need the men to kind of step it up, because I cannot imagine what it must be like to be a disabled person or a person of color, because being a woman is tiring enough in trying to explain why you can't make the shitty racist comment and how harmful that is. And so we really need some men to, I guess, figure it out and do some learning and unlearn your bias and acknowledge that there are issues and acknowledge that you're part of it, that you I myself 100% have had to do a lot of learning and working. I have been ableist. I've been racist. There's been things that have been part of my unconscious bias that I've had to unlearn, and I still am still on this massive journey. Just entry level stuff, please, from our men, because then we can all work together and would just be so much easier.
And it's going to affect the men. That's the thing. They think it doesn't affect them. There is no world where this does not affect them. They will have a sister, a daughter, a cousin, whoever it may be, who wants to have equal opportunities, and they can't. So, yeah, it's not good enough to say it doesn't affect me.
Yeah, and even just on being a human being, I just don't understand how you'd want to continue upholding a system that makes people feel shit and makes people feel like they don't belong in certain spaces just because you feel like it's a minor inconvenience that you've got to train on a half an oval instead of a full oval, or any other minor. And the empowerment of one group of people doesn't mean that you're being disempowered. It actually just means that they are now getting access to things that they can and should, and you are still getting the same access, but we're just letting both get access.
Yeah. It's like telling children, isn't it, to share?
Yeah, exactly.
It really is. Yeah, patriarchy just ruins everyone's lives, not just women. But yeah, I think mine was the same as Ripley's, believe it or not. And it pains me to say this out loud, but yeah, we need men's help. We need their help. And I think it would be really interesting, again, that radical feminism about whether we go down that path of women and gender diverse people run leagues only. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested on that point, actually. What does that sort of look like from your perspective? How could it work?
I guess Jim would probably jump in because she's more league focused. She understands the league more, but I guess it's only women and gender diverse people driven completely. We've had some discussions of what that possibly could look like, and it won't change overnight. It wouldn't be like we have 11 rounds or whatever. It might be a smaller season, and then it gradually comes to a full season of just having our own league, essentially the exact same as what it is now, but it's only for women and gender diverse people because we're getting shitted on the current league system that is happening right now. So, yeah.
A couple of things that we've discussed, and we've discussed that with some of our, I guess, allies outside of this space too, but would be to go back to how women's footy used to be run previous to the AFLW And potentially because if we were to do it, there would obviously be a travel factor involved, because straight up you wouldn't necessarily have the saturation of a number of clubs that there are now. But maybe going back to where your home ground hosts 3 rounds, like 3 games that day. So rather than, often we see these standalone women's games and no one's opening the canteen, no one's opening the bars, nothing's happened, even though, the women are often manning these things on the men's days. But if it was a women and gender diverse league, it would potentially be like one home ground is going to, host maybe half the league's game, but you only have 4 home games a season instead of, the 7 or the 10, however long your season is. The other potential one to look at, this one would maybe be if the league was a little bit more social, but we'd love to have both ends of the scale, but would be really having one home ground that is the base of your league, and you are the central point that everyone comes to. Because obviously one big thing, apart from, male player payments, one big thing that is sinking clubs in general is the upkeep of these, the clubs, the bars, all of the different things that they have to put money into. So it probably half sounded like, it's just an idea, but we've also spoken a lot about how the logistics would maybe look. But we'd definitely love to get women's leagues back together playing on the same day, because that was something really wonderful to be a part of. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure the councils would appreciate that, because ground availability seems to be like an absolute nightmare. So if we're all at one place,
and we'd all
would
be
solve
happy
that
to
issue.
share. We could all talk to each other about warming up for the next game, and everyone would get green space, and it'll just be this magical land where people don't get angry at each other for no reason.
And imagine the full field size drills. There'd be enough women so we could all do full size field drills. I love it. So wrapping up, what would you tell a 16-year-old girl or someone who is part of the queer community who at the moment is feeling extremely isolated and silenced within their club?
I guess, like, you're not alone. And I know that that's so cheesy. My God, I swear, if I was a 16-year-old girl and someone said that to me, I'd tell them to get stuffed. But you're not alone. And I think that the world is a scary place at the moment, especially in football clubs at the moment obviously, like with Mitch, all the media happening around that's, a small light. But before that, with the homophobia, it's a really scary place. And so I think you're not alone. Find your people, find people within your community that can support you and build a good support network around that.
I think you're bang on. I think a big part about it is that whole you're not alone. That advice is really important. And I think also, again, something that we try and champion, and we love the top end of the women's sport, women's footy. We want people to aim high. But we'd also be telling that 16-year-old, if you love footy and if you want, we don't want to condone, having too many bevies on a weekend. But if you love footy and what you love about footy is, Ripley likes to say it, is kicking snags and having a couple of beers, then play footy. You don't have to want to play AFLW. It's fabulous if you do, but you can literally just want to roll around in a back pocket, have a kick, hang out with your mates, 18 people on the field. What a wonderful game. So don't drop out just because you think that you're not good enough or you're not going to, quote unquote, make it. If you're playing football, you're a footballer. So stick at it, because there's a space for everyone at footy clubs.
Yeah. And I think this is something that I feel like I've only really come to the realization in the last couple of years, is that particularly talking about footy is like the AFL as a sport and the AFL as an organisation are completely separate in my mind. I have a lot of things that I do not like about the AFL as an organisation. I think there are a lot of things that they could be doing that would be really positive, because they are custodians of this game and they could be pushing so many more boundaries, and they have the power to do so, and they choose not. So you can be critical of the AFL as an organisation but love the sport. There is so much about footy. I think one of my favourite things is the fact that you've got teeny tiny bloody forward pockets hanging out with big tall rucks. Like I just feel like it's a space for everyone, and I don't know if there's many other sports where, like, when you win a flag and you have to work so hard with like 24 of your really good friends and it's fucking hard slog, but you finally get it. And it, like, a footy premiership feels better than most other things. And I think any sport, being able to find camaraderie and community, especially when I think in the digital age, that is what we're lacking. We're distinctly lacking a lot of community, and there is so much power within it. So Forget about the AFL as an organisation. Don't go to men's games if you don't want to. You can go to W games, or a lot more chill, but even if you don't want to watch the sport, being involved in it, being able to share experiences and build community is so important. So don't let some bloody dickhead comments prevent you from doing it. Find the club that will be accepting and I guess more forward thinking. And I guess from our stories, we're starting to get DMs from clubs that are like, hey, we're on this journey. What advice would you give us to be more inclusive? And we're like, fuck yeah, you're on this journey. Like, that's brilliant. So you'll find your space. And yeah, there are other people out there like you, so you'll find them.
Absolutely. I think sometimes we get too caught up in the game and less of what it represents. And it's, at the end of the day, it's the people that it's surrounded by. And it brings together some fabulous people. I know we talk a lot about the bad, but God, footy's good and God, sport's good in general. It just gives us so much. So thank you all, Gin, Ripley, Lara, for the work that you're doing in this space, for calling out the shit that shouldn't be in sport in this day and age, and for really setting the scenes for more inclusive, more safe spaces for athletes in the future, of irrespective of gender, race, or sexuality. The work you're doing is making such a big difference. And on behalf of everyone who plays sport, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having us on and platforming us and platforming other voices. That's what we're all about, sharing stories, sharing voices, and I guess, connecting with each other so that we can feel stronger as a big, happy club trying to fight the patriarchy and other bullshit systems.
I love it. And everyone, go and listen to the Not All Clubs podcast, and please follow them on social media because there is some extremely valuable content. And I can't wait to hear how this episode goes, and I'm sure it resonates with so many people. So thanks again.
Thanks, Kylie.
You've been listening to 4TG, where the future of women's sport is being shaped, one story at a time. If today's episode hit home, subscribe, rate 5 stars, and send it to someone who needs that push. Stay in the loop at 4TG_podcast or on 4TG.com. We'll see you next time. Same mission, same movement. This one was for the girls.